If ever your life could be a true crime podcast episode, then this podcast is for you. We're about to embark on a roller coaster of emotions, insights, survival, and stories about escape. So buckle up and let the journey begin.
We need to do like head expansion exercises or something.
How do you do that?
I don't know. My soccer ball's not working.
I know, right? You'd have to wear the headphones like all day, every day to make them feel more comfortable. And then you would have a headache all the time.
Okay. When this finally starts to work, we'll get ones we can just put in our ears.
You
know what I mean?
Yeah.
What are they called?
We're very cool. I don't know.
Yeah.
You still a good headset.
The liberating. I know. I do. I like the sound quality. But my head is in a vice.
A little bit.
A little bit.
Welcome into the Escape Pod, everybody. I'm Julie here with Charity. You're listening to a part serious, part hilarious podcast about escaping all the things.
Today it's headsets.
Also, in part.
The sound. Okay, so we were see? Okay. So when we listen back to, I don't make this sound normally. And Julie said, well, I think it's your thinking. Like you're going,
Yeah.
So if you hear this, this is what I'm trying to escape. Because I'm listening back going, what the hell is this? And
it's because she's looking back at her notes and in that little space between.
Nobody
that's
likes
what
silence,
she tends
right?
to do. Yes. I know a lot of people who don't like silence.
Yeah.
As I age, like it more and more. So you're escaping the little tics that we all have. They're just different for everybody. I know I say the word like way too much. And what drives me crazy about that is that my mom and my sister used to, as a teenager, when I said, I want to be a broadcast journalist. And so when they would catch me telling a story and saying like every other word, they would say, you're not going to be able to do that.
Well, they don't have the likes on the teleprompters.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I said,
I know how to read a teleprompter.
Get a script.
Yeah.
But the ad-libbing, I do say like too much. And so now I hear it in myself and it drives me crazy. So you are not alone.
I've known you for many, many years, so now I'm going to pay attention to that.
Oh, it's a lot.
I've never noticed it.
Well, that's good because I feel like I do it a lot on the podcast. Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, now you'll notice.
Now we're going to just...
Now you'll notice.
Oh, Lord, drive each other crazy. Okay. You're clicking again, Charity.
I would like to escape. This week, erratic drivers. Holy Moses. I have been in two situations where I really feared being run into, yesterday morning. There was a woman behind me, and the only reason I'm watching my rearview mirror is because I was stopped at a long light. And if you get stopped at that light, you're going to be sitting there a long time. And she was driving the car behind me, and I could see she was probably, it appeared, FaceTiming with somebody. And
while she's driving?
Yes.
And
very upset at whatever was going on. And so when I look in my rearview mirror, thankfully at this point we're essentially parked because we're stopped for a
20
red light. I can see her kind of freaking out. And just what I see is like this phone going back
waving it around.
Yeah.
Ooh,
and
talking with her hands on FaceTime driving.
It was wild.
Trifecta.
I know. It was scary.
You thought she's going to hit you.
I did. I thought I was actually grateful when we turned and then we're on basically a 2-lane highway where you could be passed safely. So split 4-lane. Anyway, she passed me and she was far enough ahead. I thought, well, if she wrecks, I won't be in the
Well, it's funny you bring that up because one of the podcast episodes I'm researching now is about road rage.
Oh.
And just... I used to have a lot of clients in Canada, and they would tell me that Canada is so flat and the roads, the highways are so straight that it is a very common thing for people to take the novel that they're reading when they have to do a long road trip and prop it up on their steering wheel and just cruise. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah, scary.
You've got to be kidding me. They're like, no, we do it all the time. Oh, wow. So anyway, Canadians, if you're listening, tell me if this is true or if they were pulling one over on me.
Well, and now people hardly have, again, it's likely their phone because how many people are still holding a
Well,
book?
I'll tell you what, when I see people do one of those little
Veers.
9 times out of 10, they're on their cell phone and they're looking down. You can at least pull your cell phone up so that your eyes don't have to make that far of a jump. But no, it's like looking down at their laps and yeah. So I'll just give a little friendly honk, like just a quick one, just like, hello, danger, danger. People are around
So the
you.
exception to holding the phone up a little bit is having it essentially right in front of your face, which is what she was doing while she was stopped at the stoplight. I find it terrifying. And she was not an old woman, not an elderly woman, I would say, just if I were going to guess, probably in her 50s. And I think it's funny to hear older people, whatever you consider old, comment all the time about kids on their cell phones when my experience, at least on the road, is I see way more older adults
I
with
see it
cell phones
all
than
the people.
teenagers.
All the people. Yep.
Because I feel like teenagers maybe are more likely, if their parents care to do so, putting restrictions on the phone that make it maybe not as likely, like they would see it if you're driving and on the phone or something. You know, some of the parental controls show you a lot, which I am digging into because he cannot drive yet, but he is a teenager now. And so looking at all the different ways you can kind of make sure they're safe along with getting where they need to be, right? And doing the things they need to do to be a normal teenager. So any hoodle, that is in the escape pod here on the One Heart campus. No wild drivers in the vicinity in our little podcast suite. So I'm
but
safe
there
for
is
now.
An onslaught of pollen.
It's
Maybe
so
that's
bad.
making people veer. Like it looks like yellow snow.
It does.
It's weird.
I don't know that I've ever seen it quite like this.
No.
Yeah.
My deck, we just got new deck furniture. And it looks like
have a
someone
cover?
peeled paint water when you rinse out a paintbrush or a roller or something, and that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
I have an umbrella, but that's covered too.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter.
100%.
And then we've been sleeping with the windows open. And so we woke up this morning and I looked at my husband, bags under his eyes. I'm like, and I felt that way. I'm like, do my eyes look like your eyes look? He said, yeah. I go, we have to stop doing this until the pollen goes away. Really puffy.
It's wild.
Really puffy. It's just everywhere. I can wipe my finger 5 minutes and I'm like, I just need to clean again, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
All right. So what tales of true crime are we talking about on this
Today we
episode?
are going to talk about some coerced confessions.
Okay.
I'm doing 3 stories, one a little bit longer than the other 2. In all cases, they were able to escape the coerced confessions.
Okay.
Meaning they did get in trouble for something that they did not do or were on their way to getting in trouble for something they did not do. And it's just really interesting because we here we go beating the drum again. We talk about crisis brain a lot. Mm-hmm. And there are different things that can put people into that state too, even if you didn't start in that state. Mm-hmm. And police interrogations can be one.
I would imagine.
Interrogators are allowed to lie to you. And I understand why that is. I understand. What I vehemently disagree with is withholding evidence from somebody. They don't have the full picture. They don't know what they're talking about or really being accused of. And I disagree with detectives who are trying to force an arrest. They're not going where the evidence leads. They've decided, I want that person to be guilty.
Right.
And so I'm going to do whatever I can to force the story and the lack of evidence to match that person. And so these are some, and what's really sad is when I was researching this, I found so many stories. And I don't have an unlimited amount of time. So to pare it down to several, I'll go shorter to longer. They'll illustrate this being done in different ways.
Okay.
And the last one is really really a whole new level. I'm sure you've heard of that. Did you ever come across that in your reporting days?
I mean, sometimes people would, in the defense of a defendant, bring up, coercion and that type of thing. Not often, but definitely sometimes you would hear, just because he admitted to something, maybe he was under duress. Maybe he was, they thought they were going to be in bigger trouble if they didn't say they did something of a lesser nature.
Sometimes detectives will do that.
Right.
Just admit this, or else
right. It can be so much worse, And I think, too, for me personally, just being on the spot sometimes, like I remember even as an adult, like lying to somebody. They asked me a question and I was so caught off guard by the question that I lied in response.
Just something came out of your mouth.
Something came out of my mouth. And, it's been several years ago now. But after the fact, I literally had to call the person and be like, this is why I said what I said. And I'm sorry. I apologized right away. But it really was just the shock of being confronted about something I didn't expect to be confronted about. It was like very defensive. And you think like, I wasn't really in crisis mode going into that moment, but in that moment, but
you probably felt that adrenaline spike real quick.
Oh,
and
of course.
There's some type of perceived threat here.
Yeah.
Whether it's someone is questioning me or looking at me in a different way or whatever.
Realizing they were mad about something that I didn't expect. Like I didn't expect the subject to make them mad, and then it did. And so, and that is nothing to do with it was nothing criminal in nature. So I can imagine somebody sitting in a, cell or an interrogation room and having somebody come at them with, accusations, true or false, that would make you panic.
Right.
Yeah. So
there are some interesting ones here. So the first one we're going to start with is about a then young man by the name of Eddie Gill. He was 18 when this happened, I believe. I'm looking at my notes out of order, and I just stopped myself from clicking because it is a thinking thing. Okay, is that further on in my notes? Okay, now that I'm aware of it, help me eradicate it, everybody. Okay, Milwaukee, February 2nd, 2013.
Or more fun would be if we made it a drinking game. If we didn't have to drive afterwards. I'm just throwing it out there.
Well, then I think we would be single-handedly leading to alcoholism all over the world. So,
mocktails.
Mocktails.
There you go.
We can do that.
Sorry.
Okay.
Start again.
So,
I apologize.
Milwaukee, February 2nd, 2013. The life of Eddie Gill changed forever, and this was through absolutely no fault of his own. So he had simply gone to a nightclub. Maybe he wasn't 18 then. I'll get to that. He had gone to a nightclub with his sister and his girlfriend, and it was a special night because the club had been going through some liquor license violations, and so it was closing down. This was its last night in operation, and so that last hurrah, and it was packed. People were letting it go out the right way. So at closing time,
playing their own drinking games.
Probably lots of drinking games. So closing time comes. The club patrons exit the club, spilling along the street. People are hanging out. They're laughing. They're having a good time. They're not ready for the night to end. And a car pulls up from around a nearby side street, stops in front of this group of people leaving the club, and two people described as hooded figures. That's it. Hooded figures emerge from the car with guns drawn.
Ooh, scary.
They seem to be aiming for one young man named Jordan Crawley and his friend. They release 6 shots. They kill Crawley. They injure his friend, and then they speed away.
Okay.
That's the incident. Now back to Eddie. When the shooting happened, he'd already left the club, and he was across the street at a gas station talking with a friend.
Okay.
Fearful of getting caught in the crossfire when they heard the shots ring out, they scatter. They run, right? As you do. Mm-hmm. So police arrive on the scene quickly. They begin interrogating witnesses to this shooting, but they were unable to drum up any leads right away. 9 days after the shooting, a Milwaukee police detective contacted Eddie's mom. He'd heard that Eddie had been at the club that night and wanted to visit with him, asked her if he could speak with her son about the shooting. Mom said, sure. So February 14th, he was dropped off at the police station and would end up in their custody for the next 13 months.
Oh, no.
Yes. And here's what you need to know about Eddie. He had an IQ of 70 when he dropped out of high school in 9th grade. He had struggled with cognitive limitations from childhood and was unable to read or write. So it's anyone's guess how he actually made it through 9th grade.
Mm-hmm.
He was described as easily manipulated.
Mm-hmm.
He was 18 years old when the shooting happened and was from a poor Black inner city neighborhood. So the deck was clearly stacked against this kid when he walked voluntarily into the police department at 6 p.m. that next day, or 9 days later. So 6 p.m., he's there. He's getting questioned. 9 o'clock, he's intelligent enough to know something's not going in my favor here. Mm-hmm. And he requests a polygraph.
Oh.
He has nothing to hide. He was not involved in the shooting. He has nothing to hide. And so a lot of people erroneously believe that a polygraph is the tell-all, be-all, whatever. You're guilty, you're innocent. He thinks likely that it's going to prove that I'm telling the truth here. So at 7 o'clock the next morning, they gave him the polygraph. And they tell him he failed. And he's not going to understand enough to say, let me see those results, or let me get an attorney in here. Let me get somebody in here who can help decipher this. They just tell him he failed. I don't know whether it's true or not. I could not find that.
Okay.
Later that day that he was polygraphed at 2:30, he's then interrogated for over 5 hours by 2 more detectives. Okay. And I think it was, another night in jail. He sleeps, and they're just putting him on a concrete slab. He's not on a mat or anything. 7 o'clock the next morning, he's interrogated for another 5 hours or close to. And he's really not slept comfortably. He's sleep deprived. He's stressed out. He's been told he's failed a polygraph when he knows he did not commit this crime. They're calling me a liar. I'm going to get in trouble for something I didn't do. And this is a pretty serious something. And so he just confesses to the murder of Jordan Crawley. So legal experts get involved and start to become suspicious of a false confession. And long story short, because it's pretty involved, but it does have a happy ending. March 2014, murder charges were dismissed against Eddie.
Okay.
So for
13 months,
13
he's
months.
behind bars.
Yep. And we know how it goes, right? When a lot of times wrongfully accused people, that news doesn't spread as fast as the Eddie's in jail for this thing. And you can't put that back in the bottle. You can't walk that back. And so that reputation is out there now. And, I think people should have to.
Yeah, it hurts.
Yeah, it does hurt. It does hurt. All right, so this next one, Renee Lynch was her name. She is alive. Was her name. Makes her sound deceased. She is alive. Renee Lynch, May 1995. So, in May 1995, 82-year-old Amherst, New York landlady Louise Siselski was found stabbed to death in her apartment.
Ooh.
82. Can you imagine?
No.
Investigators begin looking into people, of course, logically, who may have owed her money or might have had some kind of other disputes with her for being their landlady. And they really weren't getting anywhere. Case was still unsolved 18 months after the murder. Renee Lynch was one of her tenants of this multi-unit apartment. And so police recruited her to try to be an informant. They suspected that the murderer was also a tenant, but they couldn't find that proof. And so they were trying to recruit some help, if you will.
Okay.
So they wanted to ferret this killer out through information. Okay. Now, Renee, the reason she was the one picked for this is she had been in jail for shoplifting.
Oh.
So leverage.
Yep.
Okay. She was a good candidate for helping the police out in exchange for maybe, hopefully reducing her charges or something. And their lead suspect at the time was a man by the name of Kareem Walker, who was also known to Renee. I'm not sure how they knew each other. They might have been friends, but they were familiar with each other. And this is the person that they were trying to get the intel on. And so they fitted Renee with a wire. They gave her information about the case and had her attempt to engage Walker in a conversation that would lead to language that would implicate him in this murder. Didn't work.
Okay.
Didn't work. And so detectives instead, for reasons beyond me, wait till you hear all the stuff I have to tell you about this one, they began focusing their attention on Renee herself.
Okay.
They began manipulating the information they were giving to Renee, telling her that they needed her to be there at the murder scene in order to arrest Walker. So they were trying to place her at the murder scene any way they could. And so this is all very manipulative. She's going along to get along. I don't know if she's aware that she's the central focus point of this murder investigation yet, but anyway, they launched their full-on manipulation tactics. They're showing her crime scene photos. They're asking leading questions, which can get anybody in trouble. They're using coercive techniques that we will see in other stories that are going to blow your mind. And of course, that's going to lead to confusion.
Right.
You don't have the upper hand when you don't know what's going on, right? And so to answer things and you think you're answering innocently, well, the shirt was yellow or something because it was just innocent. And that ends up being the thing that, oh, well, she just verified that she was the one who blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And they're doing this stuff. They had even threatened her with perjury and additional jail time for the shoplifting charges if she didn't cooperate. So she kind of felt like she had no way out. She had to go along to get along. They wore her down. And eventually she confessed that she and Walker had gone to the landlady's apartment to rob her, but Walker ended up beating and stabbing the woman to death.
Eek.
Okay, so
we have no idea if that's true.
Oh, it's not true.
Okay.
I promise you it's not true. So she quickly recants her confession. It's just like you were saying, before we started talking about the story, you reacted to something that was going on that was stressful just in a moment.
Yeah.
Now she's been probably dealing with these detectives, and I mean, she's got a wire. Can you imagine how stressful and terrifying that would be? Anyway, she quickly recants. She's always maintained her innocence, insisting that this confession was forced by the police and that she had zero knowledge about the crime. Here are the facts. There was never any physical evidence to link Renee or Walker to that apartment.
Interesting.
None. No eyewitnesses, nothing. Nothing in her confession could even be corroborated beyond law enforcement said so.
Okay.
Okay.
Interesting.
Let alone, it's baffling. She was still convicted. February 18th, 1998. Sentenced to 25 years for murder and an additional 10 to 20 years for robbery. Walker was never arrested or charged for the crime, which was fine because he was also innocent. But she's getting all these. If
her story is true, why are they not?
Exactly. Allegedly.
That's wild. Okay.
He would have been the one to beat and stab the woman to death.
Right.
So I don't know if you've heard of the Innocence Project.
I have.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, with their help, great organization. I love following the things that they do. Nearly 26 years after Renee was wrongfully convicted for the 1995 murder of her landlady, Renee was exonerated on a post-conviction reexamination of crime scene fingerprint evidence.
Okay.
Gets even better. So law enforcement had previously withheld the fingerprint evidence from the defense.
Oh, see, that's not okay.
That is not okay. They were determined to get somebody. And if they had provided that fingerprint evidence, it never would have been Renee because she wasn't there. It didn't happen. And this evidence firmly and clearly implicated another tenant of the victim as a suspect. Weird. And they missed that opportunity. So who knows how many more people this man who had a history of this go on and violate and harm other people because they were so fixated on first this Walker character and then Renee, and neither of them had anything to do with it.
Yeah.
And we've seen it before too. You're going to see it in this other case, withholding evidence from the suspects. They're trying to engage in a conversation with you, and they only know like a tiny sliver of the story. They don't know what you know. And it's just like anything that can come out of your mouth can be damning at any time if you don't know what you're talking about. And that's just not how it's supposed to be done. So according to the Innocence Project's report on this case, quote, Lynch's wrongful conviction is the result of 3 common contributing factors. 1, a coerced false confession. 2, a fabricated testimony of an incentivized informant. And 3, police misconduct, specifically withholding key crime scene evidence from the defense.
Well, and even if you withhold, because they will intentionally withhold some evidence in the questioning process, and this makes sense to me because sometimes you get additional information that you go, see, nobody else would know that.
Right.
You know, something very specific about the way a crime was committed or what was at the scene or that type of thing. So I get it a little bit to leave things open-ended and withhold at that point in the questioning process. But once you're in a court of law, I mean, discovery is discovery.
Yep.
When you have stuff, you don't get to share it.
Cherry pick it.
No.
But yet they do.
Ooh, naughty.
In some cases.
Naughty investigators.
Yeah. So here's the, I guess, thing that finally got her.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Neither Lynch nor Walker's prints were discovered at the crime scene.
At all.
And police had been telling them early on that only 2 prints of all those collected from the crime scene were viable, when in fact 13 were. And 9 of the 13 belonged to that victim's downstairs tenant. And this guy was an obvious suspect. He had a violent history that included domestic violence, robbery, manslaughter.
That's strange.
Weird. Yeah. And they linked him to the site and yet focused on these other people. And we'll never know why. He also gave numerous inconsistent statements to law enforcement about the last time he saw the victim.
Okay.
And other tenants reported disputes between him and the landlady. But they just abandoned their inquiry into him because he seemingly passed a polygraph test. So there it is again.
Yeah.
The polygraph is not
the be-all, end-all.
It is just not. They're not infallible. So I'll end Renee's story with a quote, the day she was released, and it is so precious. I've waited 26 years for this day to come. That's days without seeing my children grow up. Days without holding my grandchildren. Days that I will never get back.
Yeah.
I'm grateful to finally have this weight lifted. So that's the work that the Innocence Project does. But stressing someone out and getting them to admit to something they didn't do just so you can put your head on the pillow at night and go, oh, solve that one. Well, you didn't solve that one.
Right.
And how many other people did that person violate?
Yeah. Yeah. The ripple effect is
Terrorize.
Potentially significant.
So anyway, she's out now. And those pictures of her.
Phoenix.
Got one.
You're on it.
Those pictures of her embracing her family as a free woman for the first time in 26 years were just
That's a long
beautiful.
time. Yeah. Man. Okay, now you say the third one is actually the worst of them all.
This one is, well, they all get me a little fired up, but this one really, really makes me angry.
The redhead is really fired up. That says a lot right there.
Yep. So this one's about Thomas Perez Jr. It happened in 2018. So Thomas has an argument with his 71-year-old father, whom he lives with. They live together. And argument, whatever, dad decides to take the family dog out for a walk and doesn't come back. But the dog comes home.
Oh.
What would you think? Something's wrong?
Yeah.
My husband or my dad or my kid or whomever didn't come home. They left with the dog and only the dog's back? What the heck, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so fearing the worst, he did the right thing and he calls 911 and says, my father's missing. I'm fearful. Maybe he's in danger. He's 71 years old. This is really out of character. I'm scared. So within hours of calling it in, Thomas himself gets pulled into an interrogation room. This I totally understand. Usually it's the person closest to the everybody's a suspect until they're ruled out, right? I get that. I understand that. So he's in this interrogation room. He was drilled for 17 hours by investigators. Now, again, they're allowed to lie to you. The story I'm going to tell you now is way beyond lying or withholding, way beyond. They flat out told Thomas that his father's body was at the morgue with the toe tag. And Thomas was already afraid because his father was, he didn't know where he was. And so I'm watching video of this man and he's just like processing, oh my God, my dad is dead? He's just shocked, absolutely shocked. And then they told him further that they had been to his home, found blood in the crime scene and his dad's bedroom and yada, 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 and that his dog had walked through the blood at the crime scene, presumably leaving bloody paw prints, and that they told him that there were signs of a struggle, the house was in disarray, and that the police dog they had brought to the scene had tracked the scent of a corpse. And this guy is just sitting there going, the look on his face, he was flabbergasted. You did?
Because he was home, right?
Yeah.
He called 911 from home.
He called, yes. And he cannot
grasp it.
Right. Like it is just, it's very upsetting to watch him. They keep badgering him, telling him that he killed his father. Daddy's dead because of you, he was told. And Thomas, he just keeps denying he killed anyone, let alone his father.
Yeah.
And the poor guy is trying to figure out if something happened and he'd blocked it out somehow. He was so frazzled. And then they started telling him, well, your mind suppresses traumatic events. This is why you don't remember, but you need to confess. Yeah. And they were sure he'd killed his father. They were sure of it. So they ruthlessly worked at him and wore him down to get a confession. They even brought his dog, which was a Labrador Retriever, into the room, telling him that the dog is going to be euthanized and giving Thomas time to say goodbye to his dog.
What?
Yeah. This is mental torture. The guy, there's video. He is losing it, Julie. He's
okay. If you said it, I missed it. Do we even know if the dad is dead?
I haven't said it yet.
Okay. So I didn't miss it.
You
just
did
making
not miss
sure.
It. Nope. You didn't miss it yet.
And using your lab against you. That's just wrong.
He is on the floor sobbing, holding his pet. As a huge dog lover myself, I'm already getting teared up. I'm just like, it was just
wrong with these
so
people?
cruel. It was so cruel. So he became so distraught at all of it. Now he's being told he's killed his father. They're going to kill his dog. He is curled up on the floor sometimes. Sometimes he's pulling at his clothes as if trying to escape himself. He's hitting himself, crying, begging, pleading, pulling his hair out. He's clearly having a mental episode. And that confusion, anybody could look at this for a second and see that he was mentally fragile, that there may have been something else at play here. And the interrogators damn sure should have picked up on these cues. They did not. They just kept making it worse. So they ended up remanding Thomas to a psychiatric unit for 3 days because while he was in the interrogation cell and they left him alone for a while, he tried to take his own life.
Oh.
And he took a drawstring out of the shorts he wore into the interrogation room and tried to hang himself. Wasn't probably going to get him very far, but This is how distraught he was. They're convincing him he's killed his father. He has no memory of this. And now that he's going to lose his dog, he's losing everybody he loves. And it turns out Dad was at the LA airport traveling to see his daughter. And what's worse, police knew it and did not immediately tell Thomas to alleviate his mental anguish. And those bloodstains they said they found at the crime scene, quote unquote, were little finger pricks from testing your blood
for diabetes.
Yep. Tiny spots. The disarray that they talked about, the signs of a struggle, they were renovating their home. And even after the father was found and brought into the police station, detectives still obtained a search warrant to once again search the Perez house for evidence that he had assaulted now an unknown victim. They were just determined. And I have to wonder, was it this I'm the detective. I'm infallible. And now I have to save face because, boy,
Yeah.
I shit the bed on this one.
Right,
Right.
like
And so I'm going to
they're-
get him on something so that I can save face. They completely tormented this guy, and it was all BS. All of it.
That is wild. Yeah, the save face, man. I think
Yeah,
you're onto something
maybe.
there. Like, why else? Why else?
Why? Why?
I want to know what happened to those detectives.
I would like to too. Well, the city of Fontana had to pay Mr. Perez $900,000 after he filed this lawsuit for being so egregiously mistreated during an interrogation. And it turns out he needed medication for blood pressure, asthma, depression, and stress. And they refused him those in the 17 hours he was being interrogated. So there are two quotes I want to share with you. One was from Perez's attorney and the other was from a judge. So the first one, quote, mentally torturing a false confession out of Tom Perez, concealing from him that his father was alive and well, and confining him in the psych ward because they made him suicidal. They made him suicidal. In my 40 years of suing the police, I have never seen that level of deliberate cruelty by the police, Perez's attorney said.
Yeah.
And even the judge said, quote, he was sleep deprived, mentally ill, and significantly undergoing symptoms of withdrawal from his psychiatric medications. She also said there was, quote, no legitimate government interest that would justify treating Perez in this manner while he was in medical distress.
Yeah.
And she criticized those officers for their interrogation tactics. I hope something happened to them because that is just, there are plenty of bad people out there but read the damn room.
Right.
I mean, if you're in law enforcement, before you're a detective, you're a first responder. You should know when somebody is in need of medical attention.
Right.
So anyway, that one just blew me away. And those videos just made me sob.
Yeah.
Like seeing just a human being completely baffled. And I bet they took 40 years off this guy's life, just the mental anguish they put him through.
I just wonder the ego or pride that led to this to begin with, because that's just nuts.
It was terrible.
That's bizarre. I have a question for you, but I will ask it after the break.
After the break.
Stay with us. At One Heart, transforming lives begins with safe, stable housing and a support system that allows people to reach their true potential. It requires motivation, mentorship, and a myriad of services. It takes time and treasure, but it's worth it because it's working. One Heart provides people with a sense of security, opportunities for economic advancement, and adds dozens to the workforce each year. Learn more about why One Heart works at oneheartrc.org.
How many times did I click? I didn't hear
Not that many.
Okay. Yes, victory.
Yeah.
And then when we listen to it back, we're going to.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, good.
You're good.
Good.
So my question is, well, first of all, if podcast listeners out there have not listened to earlier episodes, if you're starting with our freshest one, this one, maybe you don't realize Charity is actually married to a law enforcement officer and has a tremendous amount of respect for the work they do. So we are not in any way trying to, generalize the law enforcement community in any way. So my question would be, have you talked about these stories with your husband or any of the people in his circle?
Not yet.
Okay. And then, but you probably have at different times had discussions with them about interrogations.
Oh, you know what? Most
What
of the
kind
ones
of
I know. Oh, I'm sorry.
things would they say? I mean, what are some things that they would say about good, bad, what they've learned over the years, that type of thing?
I don't know if I can actually answer that. I don't know if we've had that conversation. What I will say is the ones I hang around with most are very quick to point out when one of their own does something that is not cool. They're like, whoa, no, shouldn't have done that. That was not the way to handle that. Not the way to handle that. There's one story I want to go into now, and I don't know if Tim would smack me for saying it. He's never hit me, but you know what I mean.
I do know what you mean.
So I'll have to get back to you on that because I think it would really illustrate the difference in some philosophies, but I don't know if I'm at liberty to share it yet. So I will check on that and get back to you.
Well, I think we've seen, I've seen not too long ago, I was watching, it was like a news story about an interrogation where somebody did confess and they had evidence to corroborate all of it. The person is, I believe, on death row in Colorado. But even outsiders watching the interrogation later actually pointed out really all of the things that the interrogators did right. You know, they did leave things very open-ended. They actually let the person leave. They let the person come back. They didn't withhold a ton of information. In fact, once they discovered things, they would say, you know what you told us, that we wouldn't find anything on your phone. You knew we were going to find stuff on your phone. It was really interesting, but both people within the law enforcement community and then like psychologists who watched the film back later pointed out kind of the various things they did right, which I thought was really unique and just interesting. But again, the evidence in that case also made clear that what he told them when he ultimately confessed was all very much true. And that person is still behind bars. So good stuff. Interesting. And I'm glad in these cases they did escape. In one case, though, 26 years later. In another case, 13 months later. In another case, after
almost committing suicide.
After almost taking his own life.
Completing suicide, yeah.
Right. Just not okay. Not okay. All right. Let's lighten things up before we wrap things up. What are you escaping to? What's something you would like to do?
Dang it. I had something before the... Okay, you go first. I'll go
first. A spaghetti dinner.
Oh.
I was
gluten-free?
You could do it gluten-free, couldn't you?
I could
Can you do that gluten-free?
Yeah.
Okay. With the right noodles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I will not do it gluten-free because I don't have to. I was easily influenced by the Garfield movie. So my younger son and I got our date night last week because everybody else in our family was away.
Right.
And we went to a movie, and it was the Garfield movie. And if you don't remember Garfield the cartoon.
Who's doing that voice?
I think Chris Pratt. That's what my kiddo told me. Yeah. And anyway, there's a lot of food. Of course, this is animation, but I still was like, oh, we haven't had spaghetti in a long time. And so for the last 4 days, I've been kind of craving spaghetti. So that will be dinner tonight. Did you think of what you're escaping to?
No, I didn't think I'd forget it. I almost wrote it down and I'm like, I don't need to write it down.
We need to write everything down.
There's
too much going on.
That is very true. What the heck? Okay. What am I going to escape to?
Do you have a party? You have a social life?
I sometimes have a social life. I do this week have a social life. That wasn't what it was going to be, though.
Maybe it was getting out of the social life.
Well, I have a couple of friends that are running for election.
Oh.
So there's watch parties tonight.
Okay.
For election day. I have a date with a girlfriend tomorrow afternoon. Haven't seen her since the fall. And then one Thursday, the next day, and then a massage Friday. So yeah, I'm going to be busy after work.
You have all sorts of fun stuff to escape.
But that wasn't what it was, though. That's the point. Is I can't remember what the heck it was. So I got nothing. If you think of
it, you can chime in.
I got nothing.
In the meantime, now I'm doing the clicking. Because I'm trying to find something.
I've subliminally trained her.
We're going to wrap up the escape pod.
Because we don't know what else to do.
Because we're out of it today a little bit. Please continue to listen, rate, review, subscribe, share. We would appreciate it. The more listeners, the better. You can check out our website at escapepod.live. Follow us on all the social things we do. Reach out at justbecause@escapepod.live or share your story of escape. We might share it on a future episode. Go to escapeartist@escapepod.live. Use that email address if you have a story of escape yourself that you want to share with us.
We'd love to hear it.
We'd love to hear it. We like a good true story that comes from just the average Joe out there.
That's right. So we're closing the hatch on this episode of the Escape Pod. Remember, trauma may be inevitable, but how you grapple with it is optional.
Stay resilient
and keep laughing.